Other than material loadouts, what kind of changes would you guys like to see made to the materia and summon system for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3? That was the question I asked, and you guys provided some pretty great insight. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. So if any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, and if you'd like to stick around and help support the channel, you can subscribe, leave a comment, smash the bell icon with a blizzard spell to get up to date with all of my uploads. All of it is so greatly appreciated and helps out a ton. And before we continue, make sure to check out my latest video where we talk about the return of Heihachi Mishima to Tekken 8 and some of the other cool announcements that happened at EVO 2024. So as always, if you guys would like to keep up to date with these questions and have your own featured in the video, you can head over to the community tab on my homepage. From time to time, I'll post questions there, and then we read through them like twice a month here on the channel. It's a lot of fun, and you guys always provide some really cool ideas that I never even think of. And some of them are really great, which provide for some really great conversation. So starting off first with Empty Melodies 3316, good to have you back. I believe I answered some of your questions in the previous videos. They go on to say, it would be cool if each summon had like a unique ability or skill. Like when you have Titan on the field, the party has a defense boost. If you die while Phoenix is on the field, you get a revive. If Shiva is out, party does increase damage with Blizzard magic, plus increases stagger with damage dealt. If every summon had a unique quirk while on the field, then every summon would maintain relevancy. Unfortunately, in Rebirth, cool iconic summons like Ifrit and Shiva are no longer needed when their stat boosts are outdone by others. They also go on to say that they would really love to see the return of the summon cast animations from people like Cloud. That I would agree with. When I first played Remake and I saw Cloud cast magic and he didn't do like the old school animation, it was kind of a bummer, but it also kind of makes sense because the game is so much faster paced now. But I think you could bust out an animation like that for the summons because everything slows down until the summon comes out. And I loved seeing Cloud just put the sword behind his back and put out both hands and boom, you're now summoning. It was super cool. But I genuinely really love this idea. It again makes every summon useful now, and it adds a layer of strategy to when you're equipping summons to a character. It's no longer just, well, I'm gonna throw this summon on Cloud because it increases his stats by this much compared to another summon which might be a little bit better. So now you're actually thinking about each battle like, I should probably put this one on this character and this one over here because of these cool unique abilities. And I really love the unique abilities that you list in your answer. Like Titan giving that defense boost, Shiva coming out and boosting, ice magic damage could be super cool. You can even have a visual effect for it where if Shiva comes out, suddenly the terrain that you're on has ice everywhere. And that's what increases your damage boost for that specific element. And maybe that's a little bit too adventurous, maybe that's a little too much for the terrain animations because then you'd have to make sure all of these terrain animations work for each summon on each section of the regions that we're going to, indoor or outdoor, Midgar, outside of Midgar, which might be a little bit too much, but I think it'd be super cool to see that. But having that there, again, adds so much more depth because you might be going up against a boss that does, a move that kills you in one hit because your HP just isn't maxed out yet. So you're like, okay, let's get Phoenix in there. I need to prioritize getting Phoenix summoned. So when I do summon Phoenix, I can get an easy revive when that attack hits. I love that. I think that's a really, really brilliant addition. It would be super cool to see them implement something like that in Remake Part 3. Because in Rebirth, much like Empty Melody said, you kind of prioritize all of the new summons, not just because they're cooler, but because they have better stat boosts. And it shouldn't just be about stat boosts. There should be incentive to using the summons other than the stat boost. Up next, we have Autumn. Also good to have you back. I really love saying your name. It's so much fun. They go on to say, I would like to actually find them out and about instead of in the VR battles, and then maybe Chadley can fine-tune them in the simulator. Also, I think we should definitely have access to the Remake and Rebirth ones if you have a completed save file, that is. You get me, Autumn. That's what I've been screaming for from the high heavens since 7 Remake. Battling summons in the VR space is super cool, but I really want to find them out in the world, out in the wild. Let me come across these guys and do battle with them in the real world and then have them on their own volition join our team. I think that is just infinitely so much cooler than having a VR reproduced version of that summon materia that comes to us from Chadley. And like you said, as we progress further, then you could take that summon to Chadley and he could be like an upgrade system for these summons. And I honestly think it'd be kind of cool to maybe have like a mini folio system for the summons. It doesn't have to be anything super grand. You could have like an increase in damage or defense or elemental boosts here and there. They could also learn some new abilities that they could then use out in battle instead of just having one or two. And to have access to all of our summons that we've gotten since Remake, if we have that completed save file, would be super awesome. To revisit characters like Carbuncle, who was just completely broken in 7 Remake, having that little guy back would be super cool. Having all of the different versions of Bahamut show up, I love that. I think that's a really great implementation for the summons and a cool way to discover them out in the world. It encourages the player to actually explore, not just to find items and battle monsters, but hey, you might come across maybe a shrine or some sort of new region that has that summon materia in it, and it's incentive to just kind of go out and wander around the world. I think that would be super awesome. Up next we have, I hope I pronounce this right because I've heard this name pronounced a few different ways, Sun Wen, UD5CM, or Sun Nguyen. Apologies if I messed that up. I've heard a few different pronunciations. But they go on to say, Giants, Bahamut Zero, and Knights of the Round. We need to see the epic battle between them and the weapons. Square, mark my words. This, I think, might actually happen. We covered way long ago, sometime earlier, I think this year, it might have been last year, where Hamaguchi-san was talking about Remake Part 3 and the weapons and summons, and he was kind of gauging people's feelings on how would you feel if we had these larger-than-life battles, to kind of paraphrase what he was saying, with the weapons. And that kind of signaled to me, like, what if our summons get upgraded in Remake Part 3 to the point where they're bigger and stronger and are like the size or close to the size of these weapons, and then we can watch them do battle. So that I think would be pretty sick if we could have some sort of system where there's a couple of set pieces against the weapons where our summons can help us out, but they're not just the standard summon anymore. They're much bigger, they're more aggro, and we can see them go toe to toe with the diamond weapon, with ultimate weapon, as we're also battling them. I think that would be pretty cool. And of course, seeing Bahamut Zero, what's he gonna look like? How much stronger is he going to be? And you got the Knights of the Round, which we talked about ad nauseum here on the channel, but I'm really hoping that those knights are ingrained into the game's story. Let us do proto-relic missions that build upon the intrigue and the mystery of the Cetra and the Gi. How are the knights involved? Did they do battle with Genova in the past and maybe they lost? Or maybe it was a situation where it was, we beat you by sacrificing ourselves. There's a lot of cool lore stuff that you can pull from there. Yin2 Yang 2020 keeps up with the region-specific summons and what he would like to see by saying, Rebirth did a great job mixing the summons into the world's various regions, like Kujata being a well-known deity of Gongaga's region, or even callbacks like acquiring Phoenix with Junon. I hope they continue this in Part 3. I get the feeling we'll be getting new additions as well that have been in the compilation, like Bahamut Fury or maybe Minerva, or even ones that'll be completely new, like how we got Carbuncle for a remake, maybe Asura for the Wutai region. Aside from how they'll incorporate Knights of the Round, I'm definitely most excited for Bahamut Zero's appearance and what his lore will be, given Bahamut Arisen seems to be an evolution of Bahamut given the lore in Cosmo Canyon. I really agree with that first part. Exploring all of these different regions and learning about what summons pertained to each region, I thought added so much life and world building to the area that we were exploring. So the grasslands weren't just a grasslands region, this was the home of Titan. When Titan emerged, he created this area. That stuff I think is so fascinating, and it's just enough to get people intrigued, but you're not also bogging them down with a ton of lore stuff. So I really hope that they continue to build upon that, and I think they probably will. So it'll be super cool to see what new summons are pertaining to each specific world. You know, will Hades be Icicle Inn? Will Bahamut Zero be, you know, the Northern Crater? Who knows? And the inclusion to some new summons could be super cool too. You could have one or two new summons, like again, like Yin2 Yang says, like an Asura maybe showing up to be Wutai's protector. I think could be really interesting and help, again, build the world of these locations, especially Wutai, which is going to play a massive part in Remake Part 3. It's not just like a tiny little tourist destination anymore. This is an entire nation that we're talking about. And I assume they would have some, reverence for these summons, especially if they have one summon in particular that maybe used to guard Wutai and was their protector. There's a lot of lore potential there that I think that they could really mine if they choose to. Also good to have you back, Yin to Yang. There's a lot of familiar faces that are popping up here on the thread, so it's super cool that you guys come back and leave your own thoughts and opinions. Up next, we have _Tim__ saying, essentially turning them into a playable fourth party member might be interesting. They build up their own ATB and can do synergy skills and abilities with team members. It doesn't have to be as grand and spectacle as 16 either. I also really love the passive stat boost idea that's been mentioned. The big one I think we all want though is how we find and earn the summons. Make it be part of the unique world discovery rather than the repetitive button prompt minigame and uninspired VR arena fight. Awesome all around. They already kind of are summons, kind of like a fourth playable character to a degree in Remake and Rebirth, but we're just issuing them commands. We can't actually control them ourselves. But being able to do so would be honestly kind of nice. It adds some depth to combat, it freshens things up, so it's not just our main party, but hey, Shiva's now out on the field and we can use her for a tiny bit of time. I also do like the idea of doing synergy skills and abilities with team members. And to go a step further, you could even, like we talked about earlier, having summons have their own unique field ability. Why not go a step further and have a unique ability for the summon materia that is only equipped to the person that has that materia? So for example, I'm just throwing shit at the wall here. You could have Titan that has like some sort of stonewall ability, and whoever has Titan equipped can issue that command to Titan, and maybe it does tons of damage but also has a chance to petrify the enemy. So you could do unique abilities per, summon materia per character that would be locked to that summon. I'm sure they could come up with something way cooler than that, but you kind of get the idea of where I'm going there. And you can even, again, turn that maybe into a synergy ability. So now it's just not Stonewall with Titan, it's Cloud or Barret and Titan teaming up to do some sort of Stonewall attack. Could be super sick. And again, echoing, let's find those summons out in the real world. Going to the shrines was super cool, but having to do the minigame each and every time did get very repetitive. So instead, maybe let us find these shrines, and maybe these shrines help us again, like they did in Rebirth, upgrade our summons, or maybe there's specific enemies within those shrines that are holding weapons or accessories or equipment. Again, it's really all about encouraging the player to explore the world, not just run from point A to point B. Brittany Knuckles 1427, again, good to have you back too, also says, I enjoyed the shrines in Rebirth where you had to go find them to power up the summon, but I'm not sure that needs to be back for part 3. The fun of the original game was finding the summons out in the world, or as a reward for a hard AF boss battle, and then being able to use them in battle for the first time to see what the new summon does. The VR thing got a little old. I mean, it did show you what the summon could do, but it was fun to just use it in battle for the first time in the original game, having no clue what was going to come out of your new summon materia. However, if they want to bring the VR battles with summons back, can they at least change the location in the background? This might spice it up a little. Also, are they going to treat Vincent's limit breaks as a summon? I wonder if we'll be able to control him, or if it will be like the original where he kind of just transforms and does his own thing, and we can't control him while he's in his limit break. So we got a lot of groupthink going on here, which again, I appreciate because I feel the same way. Let us find those summons out in the wild. It was cool going to the shrines to power them up, but there was something super special, like Brittany mentions, about the OG game. And this isn't just FF7, this is all of the Final Fantasies. When you got a brand new summon, it was so exciting to equip that summon and see what they could do. What was their animation? Did they have any status effects? What kind of stat boosts did they give you? I kind of wouldn't mind seeing a return to that. And if we're able to, again, find these summons out in the real world for the first time, we would then encounter that for the first time if we either have to fight the summon or we have to get through a specific boss to then acquire the summon, and then we can just use it for the very first time and see it unfold. How does it look on the field? What abilities does it have? What is its ultimate attack? That really brings back a lot of the, intrigue of the summons and keeps them feeling fresh. So I actually wouldn't mind seeing a turn like that where it's not just fight them in the VR system with Chadley and then you already see what they can do. And to Brittany's point of the VR simulator, the VR simulator is really pretty. but it does get boring really, really fast. So if they could have an option to change the VR space to match the region that these summons come from, I think would be really nice, and it would really freshen things up. Take, for example, in Rebirth, when you go to Gilgamesh Island and you fight the summons there, you're fighting them in this beautiful, like Japanese garden inspired area, but there's still trees and rocks and wildlife around you. So you have your specific arena, but the area around you is different, and it keeps it really fresh and fun. So, for example, Titan. We find Titan in the grasslands. So when we fight Titan in the VR space, let the VR space reflect the grasslands region. And if you want to go a step further, you can have phases to these battles, and as each phase happens, the environment changes. So maybe at the beginning you're fighting Titan in the wastelands, and then in the second phase you're fighting Titan in the main grasslands area, and then in the final phase it changes to the swamp. So just keeping things fresh visually, I think would be super cool. Maybe technically it might be a bit too much to do that. I know games like Horizon Forbidden West kind of do something a little similar, where you have your hub area where you talk to one of the characters, and it's essentially a VR space, and you can change how that room looks, but it takes kind of 10 seconds or so for that environment to change. And that's on a PlayStation 5. So this might be a situation where trying to change the environment may be a bit too much. But if you can have just at least one set environment for each summon, I think that really does go a long way. And Vincent, someone we talked about before, I think Vincent will act like a summon. Once he hits that limit break, he'll transform and we won't have any control over him. Although maybe we might be able to issue some abilities here and there, but I think making him his own thing kind of makes him a bit of a wild card, so you'll never really know what he's going to do, much like he was in the OG game. Jaznada519 says, I would like to be able to find them in the world naturally, fight them in unique locations with unique fighting fields that could have an impact on the fight, rather than just a plain VR arena. Wouldn't mind a system where using ATB moves from the character the summon is equipped on has the summon perform a powerful move. For example, Cloud would use Braver, and then after it hits, Titan would do a ground slam, which has unique properties. Basically, I want them to enhance the movesets of each character while they're out, on top of the passive behavior and abilities they have at the moment. You hit the nail on the head and explained this way better than I did earlier in the video. So essentially you would have the summons and whoever is using them work synergistically, like you used the example of Braver and then Titan following up with his own attack. That I think would be the best way to implement it. And again, it encourages the player to use a variety of abilities instead of just relying on the ones that you think are best. That is smart. Thank you for pointing that out. You pointed that out way better than I could ever do. Matthew W. April 3119 says, personally, I'd like those elemental abilities like Wind Current and Wildfire or whatever to go under the spell category. The ability list got so long in Rebirth that scrolling through it to find the one you wanted slowed down the fight more than I'd liked. Also, making the enemy skill materia have its own command slot just so the normal abilities don't get overcrowded. This is perfect. This is like, when you think of quality of life improvements, this is what I would think of. And having those specific things like Wildfire and Wind Current, those should definitely go under the spell category. And again, bring back enemy skill, but let it be its own tab that we open up. It just keeps things less cluttered and easier to navigate. That I think is a really brilliant quality of life feature. Swalhal3701 goes on to say, the summons in battle work just fine, but we absolutely need all of them in part 3. As for materia in general, they should introduce the water and earth element, which I'm sure they won't at this point. To mitigate the higher number of elements, they could make double magic materia the default, fire and blizzard, fire and thunder, etc. And maybe make triple magic materia the new one of a kind materia. That would be interesting to see if the double materia is the base materia that we start off with in part 3. Those materias I always had equipped to Aerith to make sure that she had access to every elemental spell, even if it was a little bit weaker. And introducing things like water and earth could be super cool. I guess you could argue that you kind of do have an earth element with the petrify materia and being able to cast Quake on some enemies, but they might not want to add another element or two to kind of complicate things, even though I personally wouldn't mind seeing like water spells show up in Remake Part 3. Barissa X-Man 2 says, I want summons to work like synergy abilities, like there's some sort of cost you build up that you can use in a fight that you can spend for a big move. I feel like I barely used summons in regular fights that often. That is also another quality of life thing. You know how we have our synergy pips? You could do synergy summon pips, or maybe sacrifice the standard synergy pips to boost up your summon to do that kind of combo attack. That adds, again, even more depth. And the developers are all about improving the combat mechanics and adding new mechanics that are actually, you know, not only story related, but make sense. And again, that encourages you to bring out the summon and use them even more instead of just kind of having them be a passive thing out on the field. Combat Geek goes on to say, just as Vincent uses proto materia to transform into chaos or other beasts, summon materia can work similarly. These mechanics are already in Rebirth, so they will likely carry this scheme into future games. Similarly, just as Scarlet uses a new mech in Rebirth, similar mechanics in Solutions will be used. So again, we kind of touched on this in previous videos about how would you have Vincent learn new limit breaks? Would it just be learn as you go, or would he acquire new proto materia that lets him become, you know, the Jason Voorhees guy or the vampire guy? That would add an extra layer to depth, I think, for Vincent, and especially, you know, if you're a big Vincent guy and you want him in your party at most times, you would be encouraged to, again, explore the world, maybe do side missions pertaining to Vincent. You'd learn more about Lucrezia, Hojo, Sephiroth, Vincent himself, and as a bonus reward, you'd get that proto materia. Andrew Wayland, 4509, good to have you back too, says we should definitely have Remake and Rebirth summons on top of Part 3 and have all of the summon materias together. Kind of makes me wonder if they would consider doing a master materia for the summon. That might be a bit overpowered, but whoever has that equipped, maybe they don't get any stat boosts, but they have access to all of the summons that we've acquired. That might be a bit overkill, but it's kind of an interesting idea to throw out there. Cade9689 kind of echoes some stuff we touched on earlier in the video by saying if they don't want to change the way summons work in battle, the minimum they need to do is give them their own ATB. But I think a cool rework would be like a Final Fantasy VIII system where it's just one big attack, but they have their own level system and stats/abilities. And eventually allowing them to break damage cap would be a cool addition. Also allowing a linked materia in the weapon could open up some cool possibilities. So it's kind of like what we touched on earlier in the video by allowing summons to have their own unique stats and abilities that would pertain to the person who has them equipped, instead of it being like a shared thing that you just learn. And the more we see people talking about this, the more it kind of makes me wonder if maybe the, you know, developers would incorporate these types of systems. Simeon Garvin 2062 says, I want the simulator to have solo and group boss battles, replicating fights that are actually hard to learn in the story. Give me solo Rude, solo Elena, solo Reno. Give me ones where I fight them in alternating pairs. Give me one where I fight all three. Do simulators for all the bosses so we can actually get good. Don't throw virtual Sephiroth into a gauntlet at the end of a brutal gauntlet. So that first part I actually would like, not just to learn the battles themselves, but some of those fights in the game are just really fun to do. And being able to revisit certain boss battles or like mini boss battles, I think would be a lot of fun. We can do that already with some of those challenges and with the summon battles, but let me have like boss rush gauntlet where I can pick whatever boss I want, or I can fight them all in one go. And I do agree with that last part there. There's nothing more demoralizing than fighting your way through a 20-round gauntlet to get to the very end, and then you get crushed within seconds. And then you have to repeat that entire gauntlet all over again. So maybe kind of finding checkpoints or finding ways to split up some of these battles might be a smart idea. And we'll end on, oh god, I hope I pronounced this properly, Radis Quitst, I believe is how you pronounced it. They say get rid of the Chadley mechanic. It makes the game easy and less adventure focused. It makes the game predictable. Let people get lost and find their own way forward. Let them get lost in a high level area and wipe. Then try again another way. Chadley makes the game linear, like there's no other way to play except check all the boxes and go. That's a pretty common mechanic criticism that people have with all open world adventure games, where it's like you just look at the map and then you find the waypoint and you go there, and it really feels like you're not adventuring and exploring on your own volition. The game is kind of telling you where to go. There are some games that do that really well, like Ghost of Tsushima. That game is virtually HUD-less. There's no waypoints to mark your way on the actual game when you're playing. You're basically following the wind. So you swipe up on your touchpad and the wind tells you what direction you need to go in, and then you just go there. And you might find things along the way, different enemies to fight, different side quests to do, different items to collect, and it feels very spontaneous. I believe Horizon Forbidden West also does that, where you can turn off like waypoint markers. So that could be an option that they add for people that want a bit of a harder, more challenging experience, or maybe just want to feel like they're exploring naturally. Don't let Chadley tell you where to go or have waypoints show up. Just let the player just kind of explore and, hey, I see a tower in the distance, I'm gonna make my way there. Instead of let's look at the map, let's mark the tower and then go there. So there's a lot of ways to freshen that up, either by incorporating it into the game or just having it be an option that you change within the system menu. But again, I think we may lose Chadley for a bit in part 3, which might force the player to do navigation on their own, which I think could be a lot of fun. And that was one of the great things about OG FF7, even though it was a more linear game, just running around the world map and coming across something on your own was incredibly exciting, because you never knew what it was going to be, and you never really knew what was going to be around the corner. So with that being said, that is the video. Thank you to everyone who responded with their own thoughts and ideas. Again, you guys have some really great ideas that never crossed my mind, and they make me super excited to see what the developers do with part 3, because there's a lot of good stuff here that you could mine to help improve the game, especially when it comes to quality of life stuff, materia, and the summons. And if I didn't get to your response, I apologize. There was a lot of overlap on the question thread, so I didn't want to repeat things too much. But if you did leave a comment, I greatly appreciate it. I probably saw it, and it really does mean a lot. So with that being said, let me know in the comments down below of this video what you guys thought of the suggestions. I will see you guys in the next one. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.